Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars drift past through the main viewport. 3 years of deep space exploration had taught him to appreciate these quiet moments. His ship carried 47 souls. Through the darkness between worlds, keeping them safe was the only thing that mattered to him. The Horizon was not a warship. Her hull was painted white with blue stripes, marking her as a peaceful research vessel. Her cargo holds were filled with scientific equipment instead of weapons. Her crew quarters housed alien scientists alongside human engineers. This was the immense future that Earth had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. Dr. Lisa Grant walked onto the bridge carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Jake and took her usual spot at the science station. Lisa had spent the last 6 months working with alien researchers, learning about worlds and creatures that Earth had never imagined. Her excitement about each new discovery reminded Jake why humanity had chosen cooperation over conquest. "The asteroid samples from Sector 7 are incredible," Lisa said, pulling up data on her screen. "Creshfell thinks we might have found traces of a completely new form of crystal growth. If we're right, this could change how we understand mineral formation across the galaxy." Jake smiled. Creshfallium was a Xanthari scientist who had become like family to Lisa. The insect-like alien had taught her 3 different languages and shared stories of his homeworld's ancient history. In return, Lisa had shown him Earth music and introduced him to the concept of humor. Their friendship was exactly what the Galactic Council had hoped for when they approved joint missions. The Xanthari were one of the older species in the galaxy. They had been exploring space when humans were still learning to make fire, but they welcomed Earth's newcomers with patience and kindness. They shared their knowledge freely and asked for nothing in return except friendship. The Vakaran engineers were different but equally helpful. They worked with metal and energy in ways that seemed like magic to human eyes. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh spent his days learning from them, picking up techniques that would benefit every human colony. The Vakarans were quiet by nature, but they showed their friendship through their willingness to teach. The Hellion navigators were the most alien of all. Their bodies were made of something that looked like living crystal, and they could sense the paths between stars in ways that no other species understood. Navigator Selden Prime had guided the Horizon through hyperspace jumps that would have been impossible for human computers to calculate. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words carried the wisdom of a species that had been traveling between galaxies for millions of years. "Sir, we're receiving a priority message from Earth. Communications," Officer Ben Carter announced from his station. He was young for his rank, but Jake had learned to trust his judgment. Ben had a gift for reading between the lines of official messages. "Put it through to my ready room," Jake said. He turned to Lisa. "Keep monitoring those samples. I want to know if Creshfall's theory is correct." Jake's ready room was small and practical. A desk, 2 chairs, and a wall screen that could connect him to anywhere in human space. The message was from Admiral Steve Brooks at Earth's Defense Command. Steve was an old friend who had served with Jake during the early exploration missions. If he was sending priority messages, something important was happening. Steve's face appeared on the screen, and Jake could see the worry in his eyes. "Jake, I need you to be extra careful out there. We're getting reports of increased hegemony activity in your sector. They've been hitting cargo ships and science vessels. Nothing too serious yet, but they're definitely getting bolder." Adash was a collection of species that believed in strength above all else. They saw diplomacy as weakness and cooperation as foolishness. For years, they had been expanding their territory through force, but they had always avoided direct conflict. With the major galactic powers, the Galactic Council kept promising that diplomatic pressure would contain them. "We're far from any established hegemony territory," Jake replied to the recording, "but I'll make sure the crew knows to be alert. Are you sending any escort ships?" The answer came back 6 hours later. No escort ships were available. Earth's fleet was stretched thin across 100 colonies, and the Council had assured everyone that the hegemony wouldn't risk attacking a joint research mission. The aliens on board the Horizon were citizens of powerful species. An attack on them would bring serious consequences. Jake shared the information with his senior staff during their daily briefing. Danny Walsh looked concerned but not surprised. The chief engineer had been worried about hegemony expansion for months. He had served on cargo ships before joining the Horizon, and he had heard too many stories about missing vessels in contested space. Maybe we should cut the mission short, Danny suggested. We've got enough data to keep the scientists busy for years. No reason to push our luck, Lisa shook her head. We're so close to a breakthrough with these crystal formations. Creshvolium says his people have been looking for something like this for decades. If we leave now, another ship might not reach this sector for years. Dr. Paul Miller, the missions senior geologist, agreed with Lisa. The mineral wealth in this system could support dozens of colonies. We owe it to future generations to complete our survey. Jake made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. They would continue the mission, but increase security protocols. All crew members would carry emergency beacons. The ship would maintain full sensor sweeps at all times. If any unknown vessels approached, they would jump to hyperspace immediately. The next 3 days passed peacefully. The crew completed their survey of the asteroid field and prepared to move on to the next system. Lisa's work with Creshvolium had confirmed their theory about the crystal formations. The discovery would revolutionize mineral extraction. Techniques across human space. Navigator Selmprime calculated the hyperspace jump coordinates while Danny's team prepared the engines. The Vakran engineers double-checked every system, ensuring that the Horizon would reach the next system safely. It was routine work, the kind of cooperation between species that had become normal during 30 years of peaceful contact. Jake was reviewing the mission reports when Ben Carter's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, I'm picking up multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Configuration matches hegemony warships. Jake ran to the bridge, his heart already knowing what his mind refused to accept. The main screen showed 6 angular ships painted in the red and black colors of the hegemony fleet. They were military vessels built for war rather than exploration. Their weapons were already charging. Open a channel, Jake ordered. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Horizon. We are a peaceful research vessel operating under Galactic Council authority. We have citizens of multiple species aboard, including Xanthari, Vakran, and Helian nationals. The response came immediately. A reptilian face appeared on the screen, with yellow eyes that held nothing but contempt. I am War Leader Thexgarn of the Krolik Dominion. Your species designation and passenger manifest are irrelevant. You are Deathworlders, and your alien friends are traitors to their own kind for working with you. Jake felt ice in his veins. The hegemony had never attacked a council vessel before. This was supposed to be impossible. We are conducting peaceful research. We have no weapons and pose no threat to anyone. Thexgarn's laugh was like breaking glass. Deathworlders are always a threat. Your very existence is an insult to civilized species. Consider this a lesson for your pathetic council. The age of Deathworlder mercy is over. The hegemony ships opened fire. The Horizon's shields flared and died under the assault. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as hull plating vaporized under alien weapons. Jake knew they had perhaps minutes before the ship was completely destroyed. All hands, abandon ship, he ordered. Emergency evacuation protocols are now in effect. As his crew ran for the escape pods, Jake stayed at his post. Someone had to ensure that word of this attack reached Earth. Someone had to tell the galaxy that the hegemony had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He activated the ship's emergency beacon and began recording everything that happened next. The last thing Jake Morrison saw was Thexgarn's face smiling as hegemony Marines boarded his dying ship. The first energy blast tore through the Horizon's outer hull like paper. Captain Jake Morrison felt the deck shake beneath his feet as atmosphere rushed out through the breach. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red, and the computer's voice announced hull failures on 7 different decks. Dr. Lisa Grant was thrown against her console as another blast struck the ship. She pulled herself up and saw Jake still standing at his command station, his hands flying over the controls. He was trying to reroute power to the engines, hoping to give them enough thrust to escape. But the hegemony ships had positioned themselves perfectly. There was nowhere to run. Danny, I need engine power, Jake called into his communicator. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh's voice came back through static and the sound of screaming metal. The main reactor's offline, Captain. They hit us right in the power core. I'm trying to bring the backup systems online, but it's going to take time we don't have. Through the main viewport, Lisa could see the hegemony warships moving closer. They were not trying to destroy the horizon quickly. Instead, they were taking their time, cutting away pieces of the ship with precise weapon strikes. This was not a battle. This was something much worse. Communications Officer Ben Carter looked up from his station with panic in his eyes. Captain, they're jamming our distress signals. I can't reach anyone outside the system. Jake's jaw tightened. The hegemony was not just attacking them. They were making sure no one would know what happened until it was too late. Keep trying, Ben. Someone needs to know what's happening here. The ship shuddered again as another section of hull was torn away. Jake could see crew members running through the corridors on his security monitors, humans and aliens working together, trying to reach the escape pods before the ship came apart completely. Many of them had been friends for months. Now they were all going to die together. Dr. Paul Miller's voice came over the intercom from the geology lab. Captain, the Zenthari research section has been hit. Crush Fullium is trapped under debris. We need medical help down here. Lisa was moving before Jake could respond. Crush Volume had become like a brother to her during their months of working together. She ran through corridors filled with smoke and floating debris, following the emergency lights toward the research section. Behind her, she could hear the sound of the hegemony ships docking with the horizon. The research section was a disaster. Equipment that had taken years to build was scattered across the floor in pieces. Lisa found Crush Fallen pinned under a heavy metal beam, his insect-like body twisted at an angle that made her stomach turn. Green fluid leaked from wounds in his shell. Lisa Crush Volume whispered in his clicking language. You must leave. Yes. Warriors are coming. I'm not leaving you, Lisa said, trying to lift the beam. It was too heavy for her human strength, but she kept trying anyway. Paul Miller arrived with 2 other crew members, and together they managed to free the alien scientist. Creshval could not walk. His legs had been crushed when the beam fell. Lisa and Paul carried him between them, moving as fast as they could, toward the nearest escape pod bay. Behind them, they could hear the sound of doors being blown open and alien voices speaking in the harsh language of the hegemony. The escape pod bay was chaos. 20 crew members were trying to fit into pods, designed for 8 people each. Danny Walsh was directing the evacuation, his engineering training helping him organize the panicked crowd. When he saw Lisa carrying Creshfall, he immediately cleared space in the nearest pod. Get him inside, Danny ordered. Lisa, you go with him, Paul. Take the next pod. Lisa helped settle Creshfall into one of the pod's acceleration couches. The alien scientist grabbed her arm with one of his remaining functional limbs. His compound eyes reflected the red emergency lights as he spoke in perfect English. Tell my people what happened here. Tell them the hegemony showed no mercy to those who worked with humans. Tell them that cooperation is not weakness, but these killers see it as such. The escape pod door sealed automatically as Danny initiated the launch sequence. Lisa felt the familiar pressure of acceleration as the small craft shot away from the dying horizon. Through the pod's tiny window, she could see other pods launching from different sections of the ship. Some made it clear. Others were destroyed by hegemony fighters before they could reach safe distance. The pod that carried Navigator, Seld Prime, was hit by a plasma cannon just as it cleared the ship's hull. The crystal being's unique physiology meant she could survive in space longer than most species. But the explosion scattered her remains across several kilometers of vacuum. Her knowledge of the paths between stars died with her. Dr. Paul Miller's pod made it 3 kilometers before a hegemony interceptor caught up with it. The alien pilot took his time, using precise shots to disable the pod systems one by one. Paul sent a final message before the life support failed. Tell Earth that we tried to run. Tell them the hegemony hunted us like animals. Danny Walsh had stayed aboard the Horizon to ensure as many people as possible could escape. His pod was the last to launch, and by then the hegemony Marines had reached the pod bay. Lisa watched. through her window as energy beams reached out from the ship, trying to destroy Danny's pod before it could escape. Danny was a good engineer and a better pilot. He managed to dodge the first several shots, using the Horizon's hull as cover while he built up speed. For a moment, Lisa thought he might actually make it to the hyperspace limit. Then, a lucky shot from a hegemony fighter clipped his pods. Engine, the small craft spun out of control, its hull cracking under the stress. Danny fought to stabilize it, and for a few seconds he succeeded. His voice came over the emergency channel, calm despite the circumstances. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh of the UES Horizon. I'm transmitting a complete record of the attack on our research vessel. The hegemony has murdered civilians and violated every law of civilized warfare. Tell Admiral Brooks that they showed no mercy to anyone, human or alien. Danny's pod exploded a moment later. The blast was visible even from Lisa's distance. Brief star that marked the end of a good man's life. The automatic distress beacon from his pod would continue, broadcasting for several more hours before its power finally died. Lisa's pod was equipped with a basic hyperspace drive, but it would take time to charge. She held crash volume as the alien scientist grew weaker from his injuries. Through the window, she could see the Horizon being boarded by hundreds of hegemony Marines. They were not interested in capturing the ship. They wanted to make sure every person aboard died slowly. The ship's internal communications were still working. Lisa could hear fragments of what was happening. Captain Jake Morrison was still alive, somewhere in the ship's command section. His voice came through the static, speaking to whoever might be listening. This is Captain Morrison. The hegemony is executing crew members. They are broadcasting it on their military channels. This is not war. This is murder for entertainment. Jake's voice was cut off by the sound of weapons fire. A few minutes later, a different voice spoke over the Horizon's communications system. It was War Leader Thexgarn, speaking in accented but clear English. Let this be a lesson to all who would work with Deathworlders. Our species is a plague upon the galaxy, and those who help you spread your contamination will share your fate. The hegemony shows no mercy to the weak. Lisa's pod finally reached the hyperspace limit and jumped away from the massacre. The last thing she saw was the Horizon breaking apart as the hegemony ships tore it into pieces. 46 people had died in less than 2 hours. Humans, Anthari, Vakarans, and Helians murdered together simply because they had chosen to work. As friends, Creshfolium died during the hyperspace jump, his injuries too severe for the pod's limited medical supplies. Lisa held his body as the small craft carried them both toward the nearest human colony. She was the only witness left alive. It's the only person who could tell the galaxy what had really happened in that distant star system. The pod's computers recorded everything. The attack, the massacre, the casual cruelty of the hegemony forces. When the recordings reached Earth, they would change everything. The age of human restraint was about to end. President Helen Carter sat in her office on Luna Station, staring at a screen that showed nothing but empty space. The report from the rescue team was clear and simple. They had found debris from the UES Horizon scattered across 3 cubic kilometers of vacuum. No survivors, no intact escape pods. Just pieces of metal and the frozen bodies of people who had believed the galaxy was becoming a safer place. The recordings from Danny Walsh's pod had reached Earth 12 hours ago. Helen had watched them 17 times, and each viewing made her angrier. She had seen Captain Jake Morrison try to surrender. She had seen the hegemony forces hunt down escape pods like they were playing a game. She had heard War Leader Thexgarn's laugh as he described humans as plague carriers who deserved to die. Secretary of Defense Carol White knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. Carol had been Helen's friend for 20 years. But the woman who walked into the office looked like she had aged a decade overnight. Her usually perfect uniform was wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. The Galactic Council is demanding a meeting, Carol said, dropping into a chair. Across from Helen's desk, they want to discuss our response to the incident. They're calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding. Helen felt something dark and cold settle in her chest. Misunderstanding. 47 people are dead, and they call it a misunderstanding. Gets worse, Carol continued. Ambassador Tony Clark sent a preliminary report from the council chambers. 3 different species have already suggested that we provoked the attack somehow. The Rigelian delegate actually said that humans should have known better than to work with other species if we couldn't protect them. The door chimed again, and General Rick Hayes entered the room. Rick was a big man with scars on his hands from his early days as a Marine. He had been pushing for increased military spending for years, warning anyone who would listen that the galaxy was becoming more dangerous. Today, he looked like a man who had been proven right in the worst possible. "Wait, ma'am, I need to brief you on our current military capabilities," Rick said, setting a data pad on Helen's desk. "If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, we need to know what we're working with." Helen picked up the data pad and scrolled through the numbers. Earth had 37 warships spread across human space. Most were patrol vessels designed to handle pirates and smugglers. The largest ship in the fleet was barely half the size of a hegemony battlecruiser. On paper, humanity's military was pathetic compared to the major galactic powers. How long would it take to build a real fleet? Helen asked. Rick smiled for the first time in days. It was not a pleasant expression. If we convert every shipyard in human space to military production, if we stop building colony ships and cargo haulers, if we draft every engineer and technician, who knows how to weld hull plating? It's 2 years for a fleet that could match the hegemony, 6 months for something that could hurt them badly. Carol leaned forward in her chair. "Helen, you're talking about completely changing our relationship with the galaxy. We've spent 30 years building trust and cooperation. If we militarize now, every species will see us as a threat." "They already see us as a threat," Helen replied, gesturing at the screen that still showed empty space where the horizon used to be. "The difference is that we've been trying to prove we're not dangerous. Maybe it's time we stop trying." Door chimed a 3rd time, and Dr. Amanda Brooks walked in. Amanda was Earth's leading expert on human evolution and psychology. She had written papers about how humans had adapted to survive on a world that constantly tried to kill them. Her work was popular in academic circles, but had little practical application until now. "I came as soon as I heard," Amanda said, taking the last empty chair. "I've been reviewing the attack recordings, and I think there's something important we need to understand about hegemony psychology." Helen gestured for her to continue. "They're not just attacking us because they see humans as weak," Amanda explained. "They're attacking us because they see us as unnatural. Most species evolved on worlds that were relatively safe. They developed intelligence and civilization without having to become perfect predators first. Humans are different. We spent millions of years learning to kill everything that threatened us, and then we chose to become civilized on top of that foundation." Rick nodded slowly. "You're saying they're afraid of what we might become if we stopped holding back." "Exactly. The hegemony understands strength and weakness. What they don't understand is restraint. They see our peaceful behavior and assume it means we're incapable of violence. They have no concept of a species that chooses not to fight because they're too good at it." Helen stood up and walked to the window that looked out over Luna City. Thousands of people were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their government was discussing a war that would change everything. Children played in parks while their parents worked in offices and factories. It was the peaceful civilization that humanity had built among the stars. "Carol, what's the latest from our colonies?" Helen asked, nervous but stable. "The attack on the horizon has everyone scared, but there haven't been any panic evacuations. The colonial governors are asking for guidance on security protocols." Helen made her decision. It was the hardest choice she had ever made as president, but the recordings from Danny Walsh's pod made it inevitable. "Send a message to every human world. Full military mobilization, effective immediately. Every shipyard converts to warship production. Every able-bodied adult reports for training. Going to build a fleet that will make the hegemony regret." Ever hearing the word human, Carol looked shocked. "Helen, this is going to start a war, not just with the hegemony, but potentially with half the galaxy. The moment we start building warships, every species is going to assume we're planning to attack them." "Let them assume," Helen replied. "For 30 years, we've been trying to convince the galaxy that we're not dangerous."
What?
Look where it got us. Jake Morrison died trying to surrender. Lisa Grant watched her best friend get murdered for the crime of working with humans. 47 people are dead because the galaxy decided our restraint was weakness. Rick was already making notes on his datapad. I'll need authorization to draft civilian engineers and commandeer manufacturing facilities. This is going to be the biggest industrial mobilization in human history. Amanda leaned back in her chair, looking thoughtful. There's something else we need to consider. When word gets out about our military buildup, there are going to be humans who question whether this is the right path. We've built our entire identity around being the peaceful species. Some people won't understand why we're changing that. Helen turned back to face the room. Then we'll explain it to them. Show them the recordings from the horizon. We'll make sure every human understands that our choice is simple. We can remain victims, or we can make sure this never happens again. The next 6 hours were a blur of emergency meetings and urgent communications. Colonial governors were briefed. On the new reality, military commanders received orders that would transform human space into a war machine. Shipyard supervisors got blueprints for weapons systems that had existed only in theoretical studies. The response from human colonies was swift and unanimous. Not a single world refused the mobilization order. From the mining colonies in the asteroid belts to the research stations on the galactic rim, humanity began preparing for war. The species that had chosen peace was choosing something else now. News of the military buildup reached the Galactic Council within 18 hours. The response was predictable. Formal protests, demands for explanations, and thinly veiled threats about what would happen if humans continued down this path. Ambassador Tony Clark read the Council's statement with growing disgust. Helen's reply was broadcast to every government in the galaxy. Her words were simple and direct. For 30 years, we have chosen peace. We offered friendship and received murder in return. We showed mercy and were rewarded with the massacre of innocents. The galaxy has taught us that restraint is seen. As weakness and cooperation is punished with death, we have learned this lesson well. There will be no more mercy. The age of human restraint was ending. The galaxy was about to discover what they had been dealing with all along. Admiral Kyle Murphy had never expected to command a warship. 6 months ago, he had been captain of a cargo hauler, moving supplies between human colonies. Now, he stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching 17 different fleets prepare for simultaneous attacks on hegemony worlds. His ship was the largest humanity had ever built, constructed in record time using techniques that had once seemed impossible. The Retribution was not beautiful like the old exploration vessels. Her hull was dark gray, covered in armor plating that could withstand direct hits from battleship weapons. Her engines were oversized, giving her the speed to outrun anything she could not outfight. Our weapon systems were based on human military history, adapted with alien technology that had been freely shared during the years of cooperation. Commander Beth Rodriguez reported from the tactical station. Beth had been a colonial security officer before the war, dealing with the occasional pirate raid or smuggling operation. Now she commanded the Deathworld Division, Special Forces units, trained to fight in conditions that would kill most aliens simply by existing. Her soldiers had grown up on worlds with crushing gravity and toxic air. They had learned to see death in every shadow, because on human worlds, death was always waiting. All fleets report ready, Admiral Beth said. Her voice was calm, but Kyle could see the tension in her shoulders. Everyone knew this would be different from the small raids they had conducted over the past months. This was the real test of what humanity had become. The transformation of human space had been remarkable. Colony worlds that had focused on farming and mining suddenly became military bases. Factories that had built agricultural equipment started producing weapons. Children who had learned about alien cultures in school now practiced combat drills every day. The entire species had turned itself into a war machine in less than 2 years. Dr. Amanda Brooks had been right about human psychology. Once the decision was made to fight, humans threw themselves into warfare with the same dedication they had once shown to exploration. They studied every battle that had ever been fought, learned from every defeat and victory in their bloody history. The knowledge that had once seemed like ancient curiosity became practical education. The hegemony had not been idle during humanity's military buildup. They had attacked 3 more human colonies, killing thousands of civilians in each raid. They broadcast these attacks across their territory, using them as recruitment tools and proof of their strength. Each attack had been met with swift retaliation from human forces, but the real response had been kept secret until now. Kyle activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice reached 17 different star systems simultaneously, speaking to captains who had once been miners, engineers, and teachers. Now they commanded ships that carried enough firepower to crack planets. This is Admiral Murphy. Today we end the hegemony's reign of terror. For 2 years, they have murdered our people and called it strength. They have butchered innocents and claimed it was justice. They have shown no mercy to anyone who opposed them. Today, we show them what mercy actually looks like when it is withdrawn. The first target was Kralik Prime, homeworld of war leader Thexgarn. The planet was heavily defended, surrounded by orbital fortresses and patrol fleets. Intelligence reports suggested it was the most fortified world in hegemony space. Had chosen it specifically because it was supposed to be impossible to attack. Captain Steve Brooks commanded the first wave of the assault. Steve was Admiral Brooks' son, a young officer who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in the fleet. His ship, the UES Vengeance, led 12 destroyers in a direct assault on the orbital defenses. The plan was simple and brutal: punch through the enemy lines and clear a path. For the main fleet, the hegemony forces were expecting a conventional attack. They had positioned their defenses to stop large fleets moving in predictable patterns. What they got instead was a human attack that followed no conventional pattern at all. Steve's ships moved like fighters instead of capital vessels, using speed and unpredictable course changes to avoid enemy fire while closing to point-blank range. Human weapons were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of trying to build bigger energy cannons, human engineers had focused on rate of fire and accuracy. Their ships carried thousands of small missiles that could think for themselves, guided by artificial intelligence systems that learned from every battle. The missiles were individually weak, but they came in swarms that overwhelmed enemy defenses. The orbital fortresses around Kralik Prime had been built to stop dozens of large ships. They were not designed to handle hundreds of smaller vessels that moved like angry insects. Within 30 minutes, the entire defensive grid was collapsing under the weight of coordinated human attacks. Commander Beth Rodriguez led the ground assault on Kralik Prime. Her soldiers had trained for this moment for 2 years, learning to fight in environments that most species could not even visit. The planet's high gravity and toxic atmosphere were supposed to make invasion impossible. For humans who had grown up on death worlds, it was just another day at work. The hegemony ground forces fought bravely, but they were facing enemies who had evolved to kill efficiently. Human soldiers moved through the toxic swamps of Kralik Prime like they owned the place. They used the planet's dangerous wildlife as weapons, turning the local predators against their enemies. They fought with a casual disregard for their own safety that terrified the hegemony defenders. Beth's troops reached the capital city in 6 hours. The hegemony had expected the assault to take weeks, giving them time to organize a proper defense. Instead, they found themselves fighting house-to-house battles against soldiers who seemed to enjoy the challenge of urban warfare. War leader Thexgarn was captured alive in his command bunker. The reptilian warrior who had laughed while massacring the Horizon's crew now cowered before human soldiers who showed no emotion at all. Beth personally placed him under arrest. Reading: charges that included 47 counts of murder and crimes against galactic law. The attack on Kralik Prime was repeated on 16 other hegemony worlds simultaneously. Human fleets appeared without warning and struck with overwhelming force. They moved faster than anyone had thought possible, hitting targets that were supposed to be beyond their reach. The hegemony forces that had seemed so powerful while attacking defenseless research vessels found themselves completely outmatched. The key to human success was their complete willingness to take casualties in order to achieve their objectives. Other species fought to minimize losses and preserve their forces. Humans fought to win, regardless of the cost. They had learned this approach during millions of years of survival on worlds that showed no mercy to the weak or hesitant. Captain, Laura Smith commanded the assault on Hegemony Station 7, a military base that controlled 3 star systems. Her ship was badly damaged during the attack, with hull breaches on 7 decks and both engines running on emergency power. Any other species would have withdrawn to make repairs. Laura ordered her crew to ram the station's main reactor. Explosion that destroyed Hegemony Station 7 could be seen from 3 light-years away. Laura and her crew of 200 died in the blast, but their sacrifice eliminated the Hegemony's ability to coordinate defenses in an entire sector. Within hours, human forces had occupied all 3 systems without further resistance. News of the coordinated attacks reached the Galactic media within hours. The reports were confused and contradictory, but the basic facts were clear. Humanity had struck at the heart of Hegemony territory and won decisive victories on every front. The species that had been dismissed as weak peacekeepers had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss the human attacks. Many species demanded that Earth be sanctioned for excessive use of force. Others pointed out that the Hegemony had started the war by massacring civilians. A debate raged for hours while human forces continued their advance through Hegemony space. Ambassador Tony Clark addressed the council with a simple message from President Carter. Humanity offered the galaxy peace and cooperation. The Hegemony responded with murder and contempt. Now they are learning the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. We will accept their surrender when they are ready to offer it. Until then, there will be no mercy. The war that the Hegemony had started with the massacre of 47 innocents was ending exactly 18 months later. But the galaxy was beginning to understand that something fundamental had changed. Humanity had removed its mask of civilized restraint and shown what lay beneath. The Deathworld predators had awakened, and they would never go back to sleep. The war ended on a Tuesday morning when the last Hegemony fleet surrendered to Admiral Kyle Murphy near the ruins of their former capital world. 18 months of fighting had reduced the most aggressive military force in the galaxy, 2 scattered groups of survivors begging for mercy. The same mercy they had refused to show the crew of the UES Horizon. President Helen Carter stood in the rebuilt bridge of the UES Horizon Memorial, a ship constructed from the salvaged remains of the original research vessel. The memorial ship served as humanity's mobile embassy, carrying the names of every person who had died in the Hegemony Massacre. Today, it orbited the former Hegemony homeworld while the final surrender documents were signed. The transformation had been complete and terrifying. Every Hegemony military base had been destroyed or captured. Their leadership was either dead or waiting for trial on war crimes charges. Their conquered territories had been liberated and returned to their original inhabitants. Of all, not a single civilian had been harmed during the entire campaign. Dr. Lisa Grant walked onto the memorial bridge, carrying a datapad with the final casualty reports. She had survived the original massacre and become humanity's voice for the victims. Her testimony at the war crimes trials had been broadcast across the galaxy, showing exactly what the Hegemony had done to peaceful researchers and their alien friends. The prisoner exchange is complete, Lisa reported. We've returned every civilian the Hegemony was holding, including those taken from worlds they conquered years ago. Total civilian casualties from our operations, 0. Helen nodded, but took no pleasure in the accomplishment. The precision had been intentional and necessary. Humanity needed the galaxy to understand that they were not conquerors seeking territory or revenge. They were predators who had chosen to become protectors. And the choice came with rules that would not be broken. Ambassador Tony Clark appeared on the main screen, calling from the Galactic Council chambers. The Council had been in emergency session for 3 months, trying to figure out how to respond to humanity's sudden emergence as a major military power. Many species were terrified. The council is ready to hear your formal statement, Tony announced. Behind him, representatives from hundreds of species waited in nervous silence. The chamber that had once dismissed humans as irrelevant now hung on every word from Earth. Helen activated the ship's recording system. Her words would be broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy, carried by news networks and government channels alike. The species that had learned to take human restraint for granted were about to discover what the new rules looked like. "People of the galaxy," Helen began, her voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Hegemony murdered 47 innocent people because they believed cooperation with humans was a sign of weakness. They broadcast these murders as entertainment and promised to kill anyone who worked with our species. The camera focused on the memorial wall behind Helen, showing the names and pictures of every victim from the original massacre. Humans and aliens side by side, united in death as they had been in life. Their faces were peaceful, frozen in time before they learned that the galaxy could be a place of casual cruelty. The hegemony saw our peaceful nature and mistook it for inability to fight. They confused our restraint with weakness. They believed that because we chose diplomacy, we were incapable of war. Today, the last hegemony fleet has surrendered, and their leadership awaits trial for crimes against civilized law. General Rick Hayes joined Helen on the bridge, wearing a uniform that bore the scars of 18 months of constant warfare. Had commanded the overall military strategy, coordinating attacks across dozens of star systems while ensuring that innocent civilians remained protected. His success had been complete and ruthless. "The galaxy must understand what has changed," Helen continued. "Humanity offered you our friendship and cooperation. We shared our knowledge, our resources, and our dreams of a peaceful future. In return, we asked only for the same respect we showed others. The hegemony's response was to murder our people and threaten anyone who worked with us." The rebuilt Horizon's engines hummed quietly as the ship changed orbit, moving to hover over the former hegemony capital. The city below was intact but empty, its population relocated to safer worlds during the final stages of the war. Humanity had conquered without destroying, proving that they could show mercy even while demonstrating overwhelming force. "We learned important lessons during this conflict," Helen said, her voice growing harder. "We learned that restraint is often seen as weakness by those who understand only strength. We learned that cooperation is viewed as vulnerability by species who value only domination. Most importantly, we learned that some dreams can only be protected by those willing to become nightmares." Commander Beth Rodriguez appeared on a secondary screen, reporting from the War Crimes Tribunal on the neutral world of Central Station. The trials had been conducted under Galactic law, judges from multiple species ensuring fair treatment for even the worst hegemony leaders. Humanity had insisted on following every legal protocol, proving that their victory came from moral strength as well as military power. "War leader Thexgarn has been sentenced to life imprisonment for crimes against sentient beings," Beth reported. His final statement was a confession that the hegemony had deliberately targeted civilians to terrorize human allies. He showed no remorse for the murders. Helen felt no satisfaction at the news. Justice for the dead was important, but it could not bring back Jake Morrison or Kresh Volum or any of the others who had died believing in a better galaxy. Their memorial would serve as a reminder of what happened when peaceful species were forced to abandon their restraint. "The hegemony is finished," Helen announced to the watching galaxy. "Their military has been destroyed, their leadership imprisoned, and their territory liberated. But this victory comes with a message that every species must understand. Humanity has returned to our natural state as apex predators who chose to become civilized. That choice remains in effect, but it is exactly that, a choice." The memorial wall behind Helen lit up with additional names, not victims of the hegemony, but human soldiers who had died during the war. Men and women who had sacrificed their lives to ensure that innocent civilians remained protected, even during the most brutal fighting. Their deaths had meaning because they had died protecting others rather than conquering them. "Human space remains open to peaceful trade, scientific cooperation, and diplomatic relations," Helen continued. We welcome friendship with any species that offers it in good faith. We will honor our commitments to defend those who cannot defend themselves. We will continue to explore the galaxy and share our discoveries with those who share our values. The camera pulled back to show the entire memorial bridge, with its mix of human and alien technology working together in perfect harmony, the cooperation that the hegemony had tried to destroy through murder had not only survived, but grown stronger. The friends who had died together had proven that different species could become family. But understand this clearly, Helen said, her voice carrying the finality of absolute conviction. Any act of aggression against human interests or our allies will be met with immediate and overwhelming response. We have shown the galaxy what we are capable of when forced to abandon restraint. We prefer peace, but we are no longer interested in being victims. Admiral Kyle Murphy joined the group on the bridge, carrying the final battle reports from across former hegemony space. Every world had been secured, every military installation captured or destroyed, every civilian population safely relocated to neutral territory. The campaign had been a masterpiece of military precision and moral restraint. The age of human mercy is not over, Helen concluded. No, but it is no longer unconditional. We offer friendship to those who want it and protection to those who need it.
As what?
To those who mistake our cooperation for weakness or our restraint for inability. We offer only this warning. We are the children of a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived by becoming more dangerous than everything trying to kill us. We chose to set that aside for the dream of a peaceful galaxy. That dream is not dead, but it will be protected by those who understand that some things are worth fighting. 4. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to consider what they had learned. Humanity had proven that peaceful species could become terrible when their restraint was rejected. The predators from Earth had awakened, and they would never again pretend to be harmless.